Okay, we're in very windy Maryville, Missouri, population 12,000. It's home to Northwest Missouri State, which is surrounded by farmland, cows, and I can see wind turbines in the distance. The public university has about 8,500 students. Most of them live here on campus, and all of them pay substantial fees. That's because the state of Missouri limited tuition increases for a decade. So to keep up with cost, the university kept adding fees. We're going to stop by the Student Center, which has a Chick-fil-A inside, to ask students about these fees. Sitting in the back is Angela Kinzel, a graduate student. She recommends the waffle fries, by the way, and she works as a graduate assistant, so her tuition, it's covered 100%.
So I'm really only paying the fees, which is just as bad. So
Why is it just as bad?
I'd say it's probably a third of my tuition.
Kinzel is studying to be a science teacher. Like the rest of the country, Missouri desperately needs more teachers, especially in science and math. That's why she can't believe how many fees there are getting in the way of her graduating and earning a degree that will allow her to teach.
Well, there's a technology fee. Since I'm a graduate student, we have textbook fees, which is like $20 a rental. And then I live on campus as well, so dorms and the food that's associated with that. There's also a graduate fee, I believe, so super fun.
Do you feel like you're being nickeled and dimed?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Throughout my 5 years here, it's just gotten worse, it feels like. And so really looking at the bill, it definitely makes you almost double take and be like, is it actually worth it?
This is College Uncovered, a podcast pulling back the ivy to reveal how colleges really work. I'm John Marcus with the Hechinger Report.
And I'm Kirk Carapezza with GBH.
Colleges don't want you to know how they operate, so GBH,
in collaboration with the Hechinger Report, is here to show you. Today on the show, nickel and dimed.
It depends on the school, of course, but colleges can charge you for basically anything, Kirk. From fees for campus services like a shuttle bus you may or may not use, to student academic fees or athletic fees.
Yeah, at Northwestern Missouri State, it's called a designated fee. More and more colleges are using these generic charges as substitutes for tuition. They use the revenue to pay for things like facility improvements, debt and sustainability, health and wellness.
So here's the gist. In about 30 states, there's some kind of control or limit on what public colleges can charge for tuition. But there's less control over fees. So if you've been paying attention to our podcast, you know colleges always seem to find a way to get the money, right?
Yes, I'd say that has been a major takeaway, John. Of course, going to college and earning a degree is worth it if you graduate on time and with less debt. College is good. More jobs in the future will require education beyond high school. But the higher ed landscape, it's pretty rocky. And we found there's a real lack of transparency surrounding pricing and, as we'll explore in our next episode, outcomes.
Well, as a result of tuition freezes, fees have gone up faster than tuition over time.
Because it's usually easier to increase or add new fees than tuition.
Of course, that's right.
I know you've done quite a bit of reporting on this, John. What do you see as some of the most egregious examples?
I mean, my favorite is the academic excellence fee I found at one university in New York. I mean, you'd think that academic excellence is included in tuition, right? I've also seen academic building fees, academic credentialing fees, academic facility and life safety fees, arts and cultural enrichment fees. They go on and on. Bicycle path maintenance fees, campus environmental improvement fees, campus spirit fees, that's a good one, ID card fees, safety fees, and solar energy fees. One university charged, this is unbelievable, one university charged what it called a free anonymous HIV testing fee.
All right, there are also those fees that just annoy students, but provide a revenue stream. So think about graduation fees and fees for transcripts. Colleges say it's all to support the student experience.
There are colleges that will charge several $100s a semester in an academic support or an excellence fee, and it's basically tuition living under another name.
That's economist Robert Kelchen. Kelchen is at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and he teaches higher ed finance. So during his office hours, I asked Kelchen, why are colleges doing this?
The first is for public colleges, they often don't get to control how much they raise tuition, but they may have more control over fees. And this is a way to get the revenue that they're looking for.
Think of it like a balloon, John.
Okay.
So you squeeze one end, right? And the other end expands, but the overall cost, it doesn't go down. The other big reason, Kelchen says, is that some scholarships, like the one Angela Kinzel got at Northwest Missouri State, are full tuition, but they don't cover fees.
And colleges and states often want to push charges into fees, so students pay for it instead of scholarships.
Kelchen defends the practice if colleges use the revenue generated from these fees to do things like hire more faculty or offer academic advisors. He says colleges are not businesses, even if they act like them sometimes.
They're nonprofit mission oriented, but they also need the money to be able to pay employees. And if the money's not coming from the state and enrollment is down, they have to get money from somewhere. And often fees is the only way that they can get the money.
Not having enough courses or academic advising, after all, could cause students to drop out. Kelchen says careful consumers should be on the lookout for things like mandatory athletic fees.
They can be very large at some institutions. If we look at some of the institutions in Virginia and North Carolina, it's like $1,000 a year just to support athletics.
And John, you'd think it's the schools with big-time athletic programs charging these big athletic fees, but it's not.
It's the ones that are trying to keep up with them because they don't have the same revenue coming in and they're subsidizing basically everything through student fees.
So we understand that this is yet another part of the college process that consumers need to be aware of. And Kirk, it can be overwhelming, but we don't want people to worry. We'll have a few tips on how to navigate all of this and potential solutions at the end of this episode. So stay tuned for that.
Okay, for now, Kelchen says all of these mandatory fees make it really hard for families to calculate how much college will actually cost.
They certainly don't help. But students are going to end up paying the same no matter what. It's just what they're labeled under. And the big difference can be what can they apply financial aid to.
And what do the fees look like there at the University of Tennessee?
We have some fees. And actually, the only increase we had to student charges this past year was in fees. Tuition was flat, but there were increased fees for facilities and to fund transportation because parking on this campus is an absolute nightmare.
Okay, John, this is another thing that came up in my reporting at Northwest Missouri State. Students there say parking is also a nightmare, and campus police are pretty aggressive about parking tickets, which students view as just another revenue stream.
I'm terrible about parking fees.
Lucas Noker from Smithville, Missouri, is a freshman.
I racked up a bunch of parking fees first semester. I think I had something over $200, which is kind of embarrassing because the rules are pretty clear.
Full disclosure here, John, I thought that the rules were pretty clear too, and that I was parked in a safe spot. But when I left the campus center's Chick-fil-A and headed back to my car, I noticed a little something on my windshield. I just came back to my car, my rental car. I got a traffic and parking violation here, $30 fine, no permit displayed. I thought I was in the clear, so I'll try to expense this.
Good luck with that. You know this is public media, right? Okay, pledge now to help Kirk Carapezza pay his parking tickets.
It's gonna work.
There could be consequences, if you're a student and you don't pay that ticket, or the graduation fee, or the sports activity fee. Some schools will withhold your transcript, even for relatively small, unpaid amounts. We'll post a link to some of our previous reporting on transcript holds on our landing page.
Okay, so to learn more about how all of these fees work and how we got here, we reached out to John June Kim.
I'm an associate professor of higher education at the University of Maryland. My research primarily touches on how universities and colleges are organizing their major practices and policies, including pricing behaviors, in response to their environmental changes.
Environmental changes, Kim says, include basic supply and demand economics. Her research focuses primarily on the mandatory fees that are required for everybody, but specifically full-time undergraduate students. And she finds, as of last year, public four-year universities were charging about $1,600 per semester just in fees for in-state students.
And that's typically adding about 20%, to the cost of tuition. And if you kind of think about how it used to be, let's say in 2000, that amount used to be only $680, which means this amount has been almost 130% increase compared to that time.
And that steep increase in fees, well, Kim says it really started about 16 years ago, after the 2008 Great Recession.
When there is a Great Recession, oftentimes state is trying to also cut their budget, which makes them to go through the pressure of, okay, we need to identify which functions we are cutting and which function we need to sort of, continue supporting. And unfortunately, I think higher education is one of the areas that state will consider cutting when there is an economic recession.
What was really shocking to Kim in her research was that some schools were pretty open about what they were doing with these new designated recession-inspired fees, but they had all kinds of different names for them.
The names were something along the lines of tuition contingency fee, economic recovery surcharge fee. And basically, some of the descriptions was, the state cut the funding, and we need to come up with somewhere to recoup the money, and you are going to pay for it to the students, which was very fascinating.
Fascinating, sure, Kirk. I mean, if you're a researcher, frustrating, definitely, if you're a student, especially one from out of state.
Yeah, and that's because after 2008, facing demographic shifts and shrinking student enrollment numbers, public colleges began fiercely competing for out-of-state students, who they can charge much more in tuition and fees. So on campuses nationwide, to recruit more out-of-state students, colleges added more amenities. Think Chick-fil-A's south of the Mason-Dixon line and Starbucks to the north. They began popping up in student centers, usually right next to the cafeteria.
These students tend to want to have, those wholesome experience in college, which means, we want lazy rivers or, fancy facilities, which then, drives the institutions to spend more on creating these resources and facilities. But again, where do they find the money? That'll be also coming from the fees.
Kim compares the rise in fees to cell phone bills with their roaming charges or airline ticket pricing with all of those add-ons and junk fees.
Yeah, higher ed is not much different, unfortunately. If you wanted to get your seats reserved, you pay extra, almost the same thing. Even academic support at different academic levels. So there will be fees for lower level or upper level students, things like that. So that's what I call the nickel and dime fees.
There it is again, Kirk, nickel and dime.
Many students at Northwest Missouri State told me they were, shall we say, annoyed by all of the nickel and diming going on. Students here have to pay $1,600 just for dining services, but many of them say they don't really like the cafeteria food downstairs, so they eat the fast food from the Chick-fil-A upstairs. Here's out-of-state student Kirsten Peterson from Nebraska and her friends McKenna Odegaard from Iowa and Izzy Arias from Missouri. They had just eaten lunch at the fast food joint.
I'm paying fees for things that I don't even use or necessarily need. Like my meal plan, I'm paying how much for that I don't use all the time. My textbook fees, I could probably go and order those textbooks for $40.
My textbooks.
That's true. I don't even use the textbooks.
Haven't opened
And the biggest pisser for me was we're paying $1,600 a semester. We have to live on, we don't have to live on campus, some of us,
Freshmen do. First year.
Being on campus, you have to have a meal plan. The cheapest one you can get is $1,600 for 10 meal types a week. I don't eat downstairs. I haven't eaten downstairs all semester.
So you're paying $1,600 for the meal plan, but you're paying for Chick-fil-A upstairs.
Yeah,
Yes.
which comes with the $500 dining dollars,
Which is nice,
which
but
is
still.
that's all
At
I
the same
use.
time, yeah.
I mean, yeah, we pay them anyways, and they somewhat make sense, but at the same time, a little unnecessary. I mean, we had to pay $30 just to live in the LLC, but we're already paying $65, I guess.
LLC, that's the Living Learning Communities, which the university's website says are designed to ease the transition to college life and provide support for personal and academic growth that encourages its mission of student success. Students here say they understand the institution's stated goal, but
We're already paying like $5,000 to live in the dorms. Why do we need to pay another $65,000? Like, what is the point of some of those little things?
and if you want to use your computer when school is not in session, yep, you guessed it, John, there's even a fee for that.
Every summer you have to pay $75 just to keep it.
That's Jolie Gain, a first-year student. She says taken together, all of these fees add up, and they make the whole student experience feel much more transactional.
I mean, I wish they would explain why they think we need the fees more, because they kind of just give them to us and don't really explain them, and then we have to pay them because if we don't get to come here. I think it's a little unfair that we don't get to understand why we have them, because a lot of people disagree with a lot of them. Right. Like, there's a $60 fee if you don't check out correctly. Like, even if you completely move out of your dorm completely, everything's clean, there's still a fee if you don't correctly check out.
Okay, so we did reach out to the university to respond to these complaints, and a spokesperson declined to make anyone available to meet with me on campus, and then didn't respond to several requests for comment.
A handful of colleges are listening to students and eliminating fees altogether. Jason Reinhold is the Vice President for Strategic Enrollment Management at the University of Dayton in Ohio.
And prior to that, I served in an assistant vice president role. And working with my predecessor, we uncovered some data around the effect of fees here at UD. And I was kind of on point to help socialize the negative effects of fees on our students.
Jason, what kind of fees did the University of Dayton have on its books?
Fees for things like labs, course-based fees, extracurricular related fees, and then we had like a graduation fee.
And how much was that one?
If I recall, it's been a little while. If I recall, it was like $75 to graduate. Okay. Yeah.
So what were the negative effects of all of these fees?
Something we did then, still do, and is we would do a survey of our graduating students and ask them about their experience. And the kind of the trigger moment for me in driving this change was the feedback we received in that survey. So we're surveying students. Imagine the student is at a point where they've successfully completed their degree. They should be on cloud 9, right? Like they should be talking about how much they love UD and their faculty and all of this. And they did that. But then they also indicated how just frustrated and, really ticked off they were about feeling nickeled and dimed because these fees were surprises to them over and over.
On average, the survey found students graduated having experienced 20 different fees.
Nickeled and dimed was their phrase. And so we captured that data, that qualitative data, as well as some quantitative data. The average amount that our students were paying per year was $2,100 in these, in a sense, undisclosed fees.
Undisclosed fees like what?
You would have things like a school of business student who, would be taking a finance class, and naturally we'd want to get them a subscription to the Wall Street Journal. Well, so you'd start class, and then all of a sudden the faculty member would say, well, that's going to cost you $50 extra for this semester, right? Like that type of thing. And it's not like that student can really say no to that. Like they need that access.
Right.
We took the quantitative and qualitative data and put that together in a way to help drive change across the institution.
So Reinhold says what the University of Dayton did was roll all of those fees into the overall cost of college.
As a person flying on a plane, like you just expect to be able to do certain things when you're on the plane. And that's how our students behave as well, right? They want to fully participate. In fact, we sell the experience that way. We want them to fully participate, but we used to nickel and dime them on the edges in a way that they felt, frustrated about.
Reinhold says this was part of a larger set of changes the university made to meet its commitment to improve price transparency.
We removed these surprise fees. And at the same time, we also articulated the net price for tuition that our family would pay across all 4 years. And so we created a financial aid offer that, for most institutions, it's 1 year at a time.
Right, and that's the bait and switch we've been talking about this season. Your financial aid offer your first year probably doesn't equal what it's going to be your sophomore and then junior year. So you guaranteed the same package throughout.
Yes, actually, we fixed the net tuition. And so the net tuition the family paid in year 1 was the same net tuition they paid in year 2, 3, and 4. Because really, ultimately, it's not the aid package that matters. It's actually what's out of pocket to the family that matters, right? So we fixed that. And actually, in order to do that, we had to eliminate fees because these are significant. The $2,100 per year, we couldn't have that level of variance and make a complete commitment to our families about the cost of the degree.
Sounds on the level, right, John?
Yeah, and it helped the university, too. Dayton's first-year class sizes grew significantly after the change, and to this day.
But eliminating fees remains pretty rare in the land of higher ed. Economists say it's a lot easier for private colleges like the University of Dayton to make these changes.
That's because, again, private colleges are in control of their pricing strategies. But state legislatures set the tuition limits at public universities, and they say that's why they have to jack up fees.
So if you're a student or a family trying to navigate the wild world of university fees, or you're just trying to save a buck, what can you do? First, do your research and look on colleges' websites.
Yeah, some schools are better than others, but most public colleges will list their overall fees, although they won't always give you a clear breakdown of what the fees are actually used for. So ask for it.
And once you do that, and you understand what exactly you're paying for, there might be ways that your full-time status is calculated a little bit differently based on the types of classes you're taking. So you might be able to reduce the total amount of fees you're paying if you're taking fewer credits any particular semester. The key here, again, John, is to ask. And sometimes there may be some fees that you can opt out of if you're not using, for example, the cafeteria or the gym.
So the bottom line is pay attention. Read the fine print and know what you're paying for. Then ask questions, which is what we've said throughout this podcast. And we've given you places to look for the info. Kirk, sorry we couldn't get you off the hook for that parking ticket.
Don't worry about it, man. I'm just going to expense it to your colleagues over at the Hechinger Report. This is College Uncovered from GBH and the Hechinger Report. I'm Kirk Carapezza.
And I'm John Marcus. We'd love to hear from you. Send us an email to gbhnewsconnect@wgbh.org and tell us what you want to know about how colleges really operate. And if you're with a college or university, tell us what you think the public should know about higher ed. This episode was produced and written by Kirk Carapezza
and John Marcus, and it was edited by Jeff Keating. Meg Woolhouse is our supervising editor. Ellen London is executive producer. Production assistance from Diane Adame.
Mixing and sound design by David Goodman and Gary Mott. All of our music is by college bands. Our theme song and original music is by Left Roman out of MIT. Melee is our project manager, and head of GBH Podcasts is Devin Maverick Robbins. College Uncovered is a production of GBH News and the Hechinger Report and distributed by PRX. It's made possible by Lumina Foundation. Thanks so much for listening.
GBH.